Hello, everyone. I think this is a time where everyone is actually sleepy, but it is my pleasure to be with everyone in a very monumental summit. So we're approaching the end of a thought-provoking day. And I know everybody is tired, but we would like to discuss on how to tackle one of the most transformative economic shifts of our time, green growth. Let's start with a clear picture of the challenge and opportunities before us. Where we are on climate action now. Global temperatures are actually rising at around 1.1 degree now. And we have seen many of these in recent phenomenon, and in fact this year, we have experienced hotter than 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is above what we promised during the Paris Agreement. Here in Indonesia alone, climate-related disasters such as flood, drought, and heavy storm have surged from less than 2,000 in 2019 to more than 3,000 occurrences in 2022 alone, impacting lives, livelihoods, infrastructure, and also economic growth. One significant disaster happened in March 2024 in West Sumatra, causing more than 80,000 people evacuated and more than 3,400 damaged houses, with an estimated financial loss more than 200 billion rupiah. So the impact of climate is really, really significant. But where we are on climate finance, to do actions, we need finance, right? The independent high-level expert group reveals a stark number of between 1.5 to 1.6 trillion in global annual funding. Only 200 billion of those actually reach emerging countries and development economies, excluding China, far short of the targeted 2.4 trillion needed for climate and nature projects. At the same time, we're facing with the change in the global support, the US withdrawal from Paris Agreement, affecting global finance effort with major US banks pulling back from net zero banking alliance. In summary, current climate policy is not enough. Climate finance remains critically short, and geopolitical and financial headwinds are slowing action. So this brings us to a defining moment for Indonesia. This is the first year of the new administration. Do we want to double down on climate action, or do we want to step back? Can green growth still drive Indonesia's ambition of 8% economic growth by 2029? Today's discussion, I will be accompanied by esteemed speakers, so I will call all the speakers to the stage. Bapak Archandra Tahar, Minister of Energy and Mineral Resource 2016. Silakan Bapak. Ibu Elim Sritaba, Deputy Head of the Indonesia Chamber of Commerce for SGD and ESG at the APP Group. Pak Peter Kennedy, Chief Investment Officer of the Global Fund for Coral Reefs. Bapak Satya Tripati, Secretary General of the Global Alliance for a Sustainable Planet, UNEP. Ibu Shinta Kamdani, Chairwoman of APindo and founder of Indonesia Business Council for Sustainable Development. Welcome to the stage, speakers. So I think the challenge of today's discussion is how to limit our discussion to only 1 hour with a really interesting topic and amazing speakers. So I would start with Pak Satya. Pak Satya, as we can see that Indonesia government is targeting an 8% growth from a potential growth of around 5%, right? How do you see that the potential of green growth can drive some of this government target to 8%? Is it hindering the 8% target, or can it fuel or help drive the growth target?
Thank you. I think I want to thank the organizers for having this conversation, because often in these kind of gatherings, there's very little talked about green growth as a possibility, let alone as an opportunity. Many years ago, I used to be heading an office within the UN called UN ORCID. It was the UN Office for RED Plus Coordination, RED being the Global Forest Conservation Program. And one of the studies we did was deep within the forests of central Kalimantan. It was called the study of the GDP of the poor. The GDP that is not captured in the national GDP metrics. So we looked around 4 different communities, communities along roads where you have access to different kind of economic services, communities deep within the forest, communities along rivers, where you have the river route to travel and all, and of course, communities that you would consider as normal. What we found was, and then the study leader would then go on the basis of his other work, including this study, to win what is considered the Nobel Prize for Environment, the Tyler Prize. His name is Pawan Sukhdev, and so Pawan led that study, and it was commissioned by the UN at that time. What we found was that people actually deep within the forest or on the fringes of the forest actually make the equivalent of $300, not purchasing power parity in real terms, that is never captured in the GDP. So if you ask me green growth, and they're not cutting down forests, they're actually using non-timber forest products to actually grow or rear animals within their households, whether it is a lamb or a sheep or a pig, or whatever it is they grow within the households, and that has economic value. And so I think what is extremely important to understand is that there is the conventional understanding of GDP, and there's the world beyond that, which we haven't even looked at carefully. And once you do that, you realize that there is significant value in keeping the forests. For the people, not for some Western countries to do their offsetting or insetting, just for people. And both in terms of ecosystem services that they provide. So I think 3 things come to my mind when I think about Indonesia, and I have worked extensively on Indonesia, so I can say it with some authority in terms of the science and the economics of it, that there's significant potential for Indonesia in pursuing a green growth strategy. Not in a sentimental or emotional, okay, I love my forests and all, but deeply rooted in economic principles of steady growth, stable growth, and sustained growth. That's the first. The second is that what is efficient in economic terms may not necessarily be efficient in social terms. Because when you are a large country, employment for a large segment of the population is important. So this morning, several esteemed speakers talked about labor-intensive economic strategies. And then there's a purpose to that. Because without that, you might be a rich country with very poor people. That's not good for the society or the country either. That's the second thing. And the third thing is that there is significant possibility now emerging in tapping into the hidden value of the carbon market. And Indonesia has inherent strengths, both in terms of its rich biodiversity, forest cover, and the fact that people respect and love nature. So all of it put together, it puts it in an advantageous situation in harnessing the power of the carbon market. And when you talk about carbon market, it's about bringing prosperity at the bottom of the pyramid, people that are at the very grassroots, and which is a large segment of the population. So I think it is win-win-win for Indonesia in every aspect in terms of green growth. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Pak Satya. So it's not only that this type of activity can support growth in a regular GDP manner, the 8%, but also you're saying that when we actually looking into welfare, there's a lot of other variables are in place, not just the number that goes to GDP, right? Especially in the forest community.
It's both wealth and welfare,
Yes.
not one at the cost of the other.
Yeah. Now I'm going to Peter. So I'm gonna talk about money now. So the Independence High-Level Economic Group panel has mentioned, we need at least 2.4 trillion to actually do this climate action as we plan to, but not many are actually being funded, and among those that are funded, only a very small proportion actually going to the emerging market or development economy. So going back to the same questions, but could you more focus on the financial angle? How do you see other type of financing can help a country to actually do their green strategy?
Great. Well, number one, it's a pleasure to be here. And I think, one of the things I've been privileged to have is that we've been kind of at the forefront of some of the public and private partnerships. So the Pegasus Group runs two funds. One I spend more of my time on, and that's the Global Fund for Coral Reefs. And that's to really invest in areas that directly or indirectly really promote coral reefs. The other is the Subnational Climate Fund, which is actually a mitigation fund. Now both of those funds actually take money from the UN, thank you, for this. And there's a lot of, I would call them kind of junior partners, where they take like first loss capital embedded in that and really kick that off. And then that actually really crowds in other private capital to go into areas that are typically not well funded by private investors generally. So there's a combination of those two things that are really kind of kick this off. But ultimately, you need to actually create, returns for people to actually have wide-scale money for that. And a lot of this money going in really kind of starts to create the ecosystem to actually and de-risk some of these areas. So in the case we just talked about with, we talked about green climate for fisheries, number one, you need green, a lot of these are islands, right? So you're competing with generators. So actually solar power and backup is actually competitive. So it's better, cheaper, faster to invest in that area. So you have improved the fisheries out there so they can actually pay and actually pay that back. So you're actually creating an ecosystem around that. So I think having this public and private capital really allows us to be kind of more going into some of these more emerging markets and some of these areas that aren't typically touched by traditional private capital.
Okay, so there's a lot of opportunities, right? It's a matter of how we can tap into that financing opportunity and create the projects that probably align with also the investors' sentiment as well.
Yeah, and just give you an example. So part of the Global Fund for Coral Reefs is we also have a technical assistance fund, which is almost a grant-making fund. So, we've been able to kind of go into some of the seafood processors and take some of that grant money and actually do traceability, do more sustainability training for the employers. So we're able to make these more economic with some of these grant funders, and also with that traceability be able to actually attract premiums from some of the ecosystem and some of the buyers longer term.
Okay, now going to Indonesia slightly, I'll go to Ibu Shinta. Same questions, Ibu, on the green growth commitment and the government target from the business community in Indonesia. How do you see this as an opportunity for our growth in the next coming 5 years?
I think, by the way, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to share our perspective. I think we know that government has set its commitment. It should maintain. They are enhancing their NDC. So clearly, if you look at commitment, they will say, look, we have committed to achieving net zero before 2060. Yes. Look, we have enhanced, our NDC. We have improved from 29 to 31.8 on its own. So I think the number sets there on the commitment. However, I think we need to see what's important. It's not just having a more ambitious NDC, but by pragmatically achieving the green transition targets Indonesia already set. So this is what we need to monitor. Are we going in that direction on the green transition? So I wanted to just share some number with you because I think green growth is not merely about environmental commitment, but it is, I think, really about competitiveness. I think green growth is a fundamental driver for our national resilience, for fostering more economic stability, social equity, you know. So this is much more, right? And the numbers speak by itself because I think the green economy could increase Indonesia GDP approximately 593 trillion to 638 trillion rupiah by 2030. So increasing its GDP. And average GDP growth of 6.1 to 6.5% per year until 2050. So actually, it's not just about achieving, you know, our commitment, but the number also will impact the growth because we always say government wants to achieve 8% growth. Is this going to be a drawback hurdle by having our green growth? No, it's actually supposed to help. Now, the low carbon development serve, I think, as a backbone to this green economy that remain untapped. So if we look at the data, I love to speak data because it really shows that there's still so much untapped potential that Indonesia has. This is interesting because the Indonesia Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources said that there's obviously so much substantial resources across the various energy sectors. We already know solar energy, 207.9 gigawatt, wind energy, hydro, and so forth. And what is interesting to see is while the global renewable energy investment grew by 8%, Indonesia actually declined by 9.3. So this is the number that needs to be paid attention because there's no excuse. We have so much untapped potential. Why is our investment going down and not going up? And I also would like to share also number on the ASEAN because actually competing with ASEAN, our green growth index is scored 57.6. This is ranking behind Thailand, 21.3, Laos, 61.1, Malaysia, 60.1, Philippines, 59.25, and Vietnam, 58.3. So we are behind some of these countries. So we have to watch, I think, this as well. And I wanted to our number on the survey we did on our economic roadmap, because Apindo does every 5-year economic roadmap. We survey more than 2,000 companies. This time, we have specific questions on the green growth. So our survey says that 23.95% of companies are aware of the circular economy concept, only 23.9%. Among them, 34.9 has implemented, 32.5 in the planning stage, and 32% has not yet adopted. So number is still very low. The other things also said that 77.4% of companies have not integrated renewable energy sources at all. This is an alarming number, guys, for Indonesian companies, right? So in one sense, the government, I think we have to, both government with its commitment, but in actuality, companies has not done enough. So why, I just want to have my policy levers to unleash some of this, if I may. I think first, we need to mitigate investment rate and create strong economic incentive. I keep on talking about incentive. Why? Because I think this is part of the policy government have to pay attention. To attract more companies to do it, we need to provide more incentives. So, like we talk about tax breaks, preferential financing. At the moment there is no better rate for projects that does this than other projects. So why do this, right? And I think robust carbon pricing mechanism is very, very important. This is a topic on its own, carbon. I love to talk about it because we've been pushing Indonesia. Let's, we have so much potential. It's like, when can we start doing this, right? So, and then the strengthening, I think the public-private partnership, you mentioned about that. I think that's important. Fast-tracking the infrastructure development for renewable, electric vehicle, and others. But additionally, also a clear, consistent, and forward-looking regulatory framework. I want to mention specifically this, because the regulatory framework will play a big difference and will attract a more long-term green investment. So I think these are some levers that the government needs to pay attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ibu Shinta. So always happy to hear data from you. I guess if we start from a rather low base, then it's the only way to go is up. So I think we can tap into more opportunity on the green growth, not only on energy transition, but also on other sides of the green economy. So maybe shortly to Ibu Elim on the green growth strategy. You are much more familiar with this carbon that relates to nature, right? So how do you see this as supporting Indonesia growth target?
Yeah, I think really important, like what Bu Sinta said, I think I want to start with the level of understanding and how the company as well understanding embedded sustainability into their core business strategy. Because of that's really important when you allocate your investment, the numbers showing that we talk about the target, but we don't see the allocated investment or allocated budget. So this is, I think, also from Indonesia Chamber of Commerce, we will see the level of understanding and how the about 77% company is not really start yet. We know that the Kadin has a Kadin Net Zero Hub. Already 100 companies made the commitment, but where they are. I mean, this is really important. It's not only allocated the investment or budget to focus on the decarbonization, but how also see the opportunity related to the carbon market. Because of, I think there is a limit when some industrial, especially if there is no public-private partnership showing the same direction to address how we are going to net zero. And we will see the opportunity. Just now, Pak Satya also explaining about the high opportunity in Indonesia. We have a lot of biodiversity value that we can measure and bring impact to the social. But of course, to do this nature-based solution project has to be again together. Because we know the land use in Indonesia is not 100% owned by the private, but there is some area that especially we already have a follow net sink target. How we can work together in that area to achieve the target. Because our target is the number, right? But how to achieve that and how to unlock a lot of investment out there. But we need to have together to develop the integrated plan. Because I'm sure a lot of private sector also, including where I'm working as the APP group, we also being pushed by the market to do some initiative in terms of decarbonization. But we have some limitation, especially for infrastructure, how to access to the renewable energy. I mean, not only like a simple renewable, right? It's like hydrogen is a need a high investment, and this is, I think, public-private partnership is really important. And in the decarbonization, including the nature-based solution project as well.
Yeah, so on the energy side, you're saying we need more supply of renewable energy as well. So Indonesia NDC is actually comprised of two more dominant parts, right? The nature part, the nature base, and also the energy part. So Pak Archandra, you're among the minority here, talking about energy specifically. A lot of us talking generic or on the nature base, but you'll be drilling down on the energy sectors. renewable energy is actually accelerating globally, right? In terms of price, solar PV costs actually dropped 77% since 2010. And battery price also goes down 89%. There's a lot of new innovative solution globally, but we are still at the very nascent of our renewable energy development. Part of it may be a story of grid, part of it a story of oversupply of coal power plant, part of it may be the need for coal phase out in Indonesia to allow more capacity for renewable energy into the system. But before we talk into more detail, I would like to ask Pak Archandra, so with the global trade uncertainty and geopolitics, is energy transition is actually a catalyst or a constraint for Indonesia growth? And one additional question, how do you see us transforming from an energy importer into an energy exporter with the use of renewable energy?
Well, thank you very much for having me. Good afternoon. Please allow me to refresh a little bit the questions from you regarding the global trade uncertainty. Global trade uncertainty occurs all the time, but the new administrations in the US would make a difference whether it is a catalyst or constraint for Indonesia's green growth. As we may know that the new administrations under President Trump prioritize American interests over energy transition. For some of us, it could be a problem. But for Indonesia, this is a catalyst to create our own green strategy. How can we do that? First, Indonesia should reconsider, even postpone, the diversification strategy over the existing fossil-based industry. Put more effort into reducing carbon emission, or what we call it decarbonization. Look at the European strategy over the US. Most of the European energy company focus on diversify their business from oil and gas into renewable energy. See what happened in 2021 and until now, European experience energy crisis. How about the American? The US keep the fossil industry, and then if there is some impact, negative impact into the environment, they'll try to fix it. That's what we call it decarbonization. Exxon, Chevron, ConocoPhillips, for example, they keep exploring oil and gas, but they also use carbon capture, utilization, storage to reduce the carbon emission. What can we do next? Indonesia has to prioritize the energy security over energy transition. Multi-mode local energy resources, fossil and non-fossil, should be used to secure our energy demand. Fossil and non-fossil should work together instead of competing each other to defeat one another. There is no indications until today that fossil energy can be replaced completely by renewable. There is no proof yet. Let's take a look at data. Pre-COVID, world consumption of oil was around 100 million barrels per day. During COVID, we expect that the demand is going to be reduced. Yes, it reduced down to 10% only. back to 2021 and 2022, we consume back to pre-COVID 100 million barrel per day, and 2024 and 25 keep increasing. Now we are approaching around 102 million barrel per day. According to the prediction, in 2040, we will consume around 110 million barrel per day of oil. How about the EV? EV will replace only 6 million barrel per day, while we increase around 10 million per day starting today. So what does it mean? There is no sign yet that our consumptions, our need for oil will be reduced during 10, 20 years, 30 years ahead of us. So if this is the case, what should we do? Fossil and non-fossil should work together. What is the common understanding of the adoptions of green energy, especially in Indonesia? Renewable energy is easy to implement, especially for solar PV and wind. Is it true? During my terms at ministry, that's not true. Cost of the renewable energy is cheaper than fossil. Is it true? The next one, the common understanding, more resources available in this country. Is it true? When we talk about resources, Bu, the concept of resources is, there are three concepts of resources. When we call it resources, first, there is a physical concept. What does it mean? There is a wind, there is a sun, there is a water. That's the physical concept. The second one is technological concept. There is a technology that can be used to harness that energy. The third concept is economical concept. At what price, at what tariff, the resources can be harnessed. So if there is a number about the resources, need to be careful. Is it only a physical concept? Or it could be technical concept or economical concept. The best one, you have those three concepts. What else? The common understanding about the adoption's green initiative. Funding is always available, not only from domestic, but also from overseas. Is it true, especially in this country? The last one, if we phase out 1,000 megawatt coal-fired power plant, the common understanding is a combination of solar PV and wind and also battery can replace it with the same capacity. That's not true. If you phase out 1,000 megawatt, you may need 4 times larger capacity from combinations of wind, solar PV, and battery. So what does it mean? Cost is up. For that reason, I believe that fossil and non-fossil should work together instead of competing and defeating each other. To reduce our dependence on import, to answer that question, what should we do? Oil and gas explorations in frontier area should be intensified. For the brownfield, enhance oil recovery and also improve oil recovery should be pushed to increase production. Why? There is no sign that the demand will be reduced within 10 or 20 years. In the power sector, hydro and geothermal should have more portions in our energy mix. Why? The implementations of solar PV and wind still face challenges technically and commercially. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Chandra. Going back to Ibu Sinta, so Ibu, looking at the global situation, yeah, well, how do you see the recent change, for example, like the EUDR, EU Deforestation Regulation, or the CBAM, Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, impacting Indonesia green growth? How do you see the private sectors can adapt to this challenge and also evolve sustainability regulation to remain competitive in the global market?
Okay, Masita, actually, private sectors, businesses has anticipated many of this a while back, right? When, first of all, I remember when we first initiate our palm oil certification. At that time, a number of big palm oil companies actually started initiative called IPOP. And I remember very clearly because we launched it in UN. At that time, we already anticipate, what will happen with this whole global trends, we call it, right? Now, it's the same thing with CBAM and EUDR. Actually, it's a matter of we need to look at, Indonesia cannot be working on a silo, right? Where do we sell our products? And where's our market? So the trend, the global trend is already clearly moving to that direction. It didn't happen yesterday. This happens already for a while. The fact that UDR and CBAM was implemented, yes, there are of course a lot of stories behind it, whatever reason, come up, but actually we know the trend is towards that direction. And we always have to look at also from the demand side, because now consumer demands are very clear. You cannot drive anymore. They have certain expectations on even in purchasing goods, especially in those developed markets. Very different when we talk about developing countries like us, but developed market, I think clear. So when this actually was launched, it's actually a big hit for Indonesia because we are not ready. I've been involved in the EU-CEPA negotiation for quite a while. And we already now in, I don't know, 17th round? I think it's been like 9 years. Hopefully we can, the government can complete this by this year. Very hope, we hope so. But a lot of the discussion is about that, Can Indonesia have special exception? The fact that EU has CBAM and EUDR. Can we be accepted from there? You know all the answer. There is no way any agreement can exempt us from things like that. Yes, they can provide us capacity building, perhaps to help us understand and train our companies. But can we be accepted? Of course not, right? Now, the damage, what this is doing, if we are, while we are lagging behind, of course, it will impact our export. Because especially when we talk about steel, ammonia, this is all where CBAM lies, So we already did the calculation if this happened. So what can we do now? I think the question is, yes, it's a bit late, but we still need to do something. So we are working very hard now for all the businesses to really invest on first technology. Right? I think technology plays a very big part of it. And we also need to look at, in terms of how Indonesian companies, in terms of standardizations and so forth, can be supported, right? So when we talk about, for example, renewable energy, this is a big part of when when companies need to produce, do their productions, because they need to have source of renewable energy on their manufacturing facilities, which at the moment in Indonesia we don't have enough. So while they want to follow the system, the resources are not sufficient. So sometimes it's not up to the companies, even if they want to invest, they have the technology, the finance, but there are resources that needs to happen in where you operate, like renewable energy. So this is a big part. Then we talk about very specific thing. We thought, okay, it will only impact those, like the big part, like steel, ammonia, but apparently a lot of our products have steel components on it. So this is impacting SMEs. We're not talking about just the big companies, but SMEs, because some of their product has some steel components, so it does impact some of the CBAM, as well as the EUDR when we talk about exporting to the EU. But guys, you know, EU is one thing. This is not just about EU. Other countries will do the same thing. So again, I think it is important that we work very closely, you know, Indonesian businesses, because we are not just for domestic market. We want to also export. A lot of our products, we want to expand our export. So we need to understand that this is happening, and I think the support from the government, the obviously support from country like in the EU, not part of the EU negotiation. Of course, we request a lot of capacity building to support the businesses as well, you know, in achieving some of the standards, you know, understanding. I think we have a big gap in terms of dissemination, you know, understanding, educating, you know, companies. We have a big gap in this. So we need to continuously do a more intensive understanding education. What kind of standards are we talking about? What are required? And this is all nitty-gritty, which businesses cannot do it alone. So association like us, both Apindo, both Kadin, we are really now, you know, accelerating, you know, our efforts to work with many companies, working also with our EU counterparts there, to you know, at least start the process of how to prepare the readiness of our companies here. So again, I think the global economy is evolving. I think when we talk about standards, when we talk about the trends, I think this is not just about EU. This is going to impact us from many, many other directions.
Thank you, Ibu. So not only from the business side, need to get ready with the support of association, but also in the business itself. But also there's some supply constraint as well, and we need to coordinate with the policymaker on this side, at least, for example, for the renewable energy access, because for export, the demand is changing, right? It's not under our control that the demand also change, so we need to be mindful of all the demand shift.
And Masita, I think we also need to understand when we talk about EDR, we also talk about smallholders, yeah, just not talk about big companies, because a lot of the standardization have to be followed. Sustainable practices have to be followed by smallholders, and that's even tougher.
Yeah, but one of the things, you know, we just had a little roundtable on sustainable palm oil, right? So Europe is actually less than 5% of Indonesia's demand for palm oil, right? And also, you know, a lot of the corporates like Unilever, Mars, they're actually paying to actually get a lot of these companies certified. So there's, you know, there's this supply and demand. Again, if you want the premium from the European buyers less than 5%, you have to go to that. If you don't want that, you kind of go down. But also, on the flip side, if the Europeans need it, they have to pay for it to get, you know, mapped out and get their supply as well. So some of these things have been telegraphed. Some of it's been subsidized out of the European component, but there's other crops as well. But it's a small percentage of what, you know, sustainable palm is going.
Yeah, that's true. And there's a lot of requirements at different level, right? We just need to understand our market, where we're heading, to what percentage and what requirements we need. So Peter, I would like to continue with you. We're going into the next mobilizing finance for green growth. So for this session, please keep your answers short because we're running out of time. So Peter, can you tell us a little bit on the Global Fund for Coral Reef? How does it work? How do you actually create a blended finance solution? For example, in this specific blue space, or how do you actually scale it up to different sectors, not just in the blue space, but also outside of the blue space?
Sure. So for the Global Fund for Coral Reef, again, it has to have either direct or indirect, benefits to the coral reef. And a lot of this comes down to this could be, actually non-chemical fertilizers, pesticides that are running off and actually, damaging the coral reefs. The other side is more sustainable, like desal, where we're seeing basically extending out some of the brine past the coral reefs and they're not affecting that. So there's ways to kind of look at commercial type solutions that are already financially relevant or can produce private type returns for some of these areas. But I think it has been, again, this public and private partnership has allowed us to look at things that are naturally a typical private equity fund wouldn't actually look at initially. And having this combination of, this, I say junior partners or first loss capital has allowed us to bring in some more traditional capital, and also having some of this technical assistance has actually allowed more mainstream businesses like a tuna processing plant more sustainable, because you can bring in and actually subsidize some of the training and some of the technology for traceability into those. But we're also seeing, some of the private sectors. There's a really famous dive resort that has actually created its own kind of virtual MPA. So this is basically a resort that actually pays the other villages surrounding not to fish along some of the coral reefs. So in effect, they're utilizing their private, this business, which is very healthy returns, but actually creating a whole community to actually create a virtual MPA around that.
Yeah.
So we're seeing some really unique business models as well.
So Peter, if you double down on actually how we go about starting this investment mechanism, right? So if you have a project, in your case it's coral reef, in another case it could be X project with certain impact. How do you go about creating this blended financing mechanism from within a country, for example, and be able to set up something like that?
Yeah, I guess, again, the founders of Pegasus, they've been around for 25 years and on the forefront of a lot of the emerging markets investments. So they've teamed up with some of the groups at the UN, more of a global, that are probably forward-looking to create more of a holistic, so it's not a country-specific, but there is member countries, and Indonesia is part of that consortium to do that. So in this case, this is more of a kind of global fund where we look at opportunities in South America, opportunities in Asia. But I do think, within, Indonesia, that there is an opportunity to create kind of public and private, where, again, for the small shareholders in Palm, there needs to be this public and private side, as we discussed earlier on. While there's technologies, and we know how to get a lot of these smallholders to higher productivity, there needs to be some subsidy and some education around that.
Thank you. Ibu Elim, going back to you again. As the head of SDG and ESG at the Chambers of Commerce and Industry, what is your call to action for business in general, including SME, to work more or invest in the opportunity presented by green growth? Like Ibu Sinta mentioned, sometimes our current condition is not there yet to serve on the green market side. How do you suggest to businessmen overall, right? Not just the big one, but also the medium and small.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think, like what Bu Sinta said, our role here is how to bring more awareness. And awareness is not only awareness. We need to see the level of each company. Because of, some company is not even start, not even understand how to start. So last year, basically, we already start to do like invite, especially SME, to start with, we open what we call coaching clinic. So because of we have a 10 series of workshop to make sure that they understand how to start, how to make a report, how to identify the risk. Because of we want them not only SME, but also maybe some of the big company who already start. We want people understand the real sustainability. We want to change the mindset from people starting ESG, starting SDGs, implement a sustainability is like a cost into their operational. We want them to understand that how they have to mitigate the real risk impacted to their core business. Because if they understand the risk, and of course, the way they see the risk, that's the way how we can see risk impact to the environment, risk impact to the social. So when they start to see the risk in the right way, and then they addressing properly by allocating some budget, that's the way they will change the mindset from the cost become investment. So I think this awareness that we want to keep bring to the more or wider member within association, Apindo, Kadin, and then we want work together with other organizations because we know a lot of organizations, Global Compact, IBCSD, a lot of including IBC, and a lot of event that how we can bring the real understanding of the sustainability. So they don't look to allocating costs, but I want to allocate the investment. And I think in the global, there is one framework that right now, I think some of the developed countries already start to use it, TCFD, the climate disclosure on financial disclosure. So people want to see how you invest or allocate your budget to address when you mitigate your own risk. So this is the real, and all the investors want to see the company. I think this is the starting point that everybody should understand. So they will see again, the sustainability is the investment, it's not the cost. When the company already start understand that, I'm sure that the investor already start to look at. And of course, talking about the financing as well, we also experience, especially right now in APP, we also know that some financial institution also sometimes not want to understand from the developing countries' point of view. We still have a lot of challenges here, and sometimes become chicken and egg. I want to give you the investment, but you have to be good first. So which one first, right? But we said, I need the financing because I want to be a good. So I think this have to, how we can become breakthrough. And working this, again, public-private partnership should be together. Of course, public should come to give secure, and private, of course, start to think, mitigate the risk, allocate investment to mitigate the risk, and we can unlocking the financing. So I think in this role, in my new role as well, together, of course, in leadership with Bu Sinta, we want to push more company, and we want to push the 100 companies who already commit on net zero hub. Let's find what is the challenges, how we can move the needle. So because we don't want to stop only the target. Of course, the target is difficult, especially some people, especially in APP group, we also have to put our target on SBTI. It's not small number. We have to reduce like 80%. Imagine how impact the cost for the energy cost. But yeah, this is the target. But of course, we already see in that direction. We hope that there is a new innovation will come with the more reasonable cost. Yeah, thank you.
So as company transition, actually looking at it as a risk, because climate risk is going to be there anyway, whether you accept it or not, or whether you realize it or not. Yeah. And then putting it into your transition plan actually is an investment, not just a cost.
Yeah.
Right?
And market demand as well, right? Like
and
European
market demand as well. So I would like to poke Pak Satya a little bit on this global financial architecture, right? This is a bit beyond the script. But this is also an area that I'm very passionate about, because the financial system globally sometimes do not really understand the challenge coming from emerging market. So the standards that are required at first are already green, and most of the transition activities are still in the gray areas, which is very hard to find financing. But without getting the finance, it's also challenging for these countries, these companies in these countries to actually making the first move for a transition. So how do we reconcile this at the global level? So I happen to be the Sherpa for the Coalition of Finance Ministers for Climate Action. We have 100 members, all finance ministers. This is one of the talk that we're talking about. One of it is transition finance. How do we create the ecosystem for transition finance globally so that emerging market can transition without, having to face with the challenge, like I mentioned, coming from the old global financial architecture?
Well, I think the trouble is that there's a lot of talk about changing finance. The jargon, the taxonomy, what are the standards, what are the processes, but there is very little work happening on financing change. So changing finance is the flavor of the day, but not financing change. So if you look at how much or how many projects have truly been financed at the cutting edge of whether you call it sustainable finance, innovative finance, blended finance, what is it? I mean, you can put all of these together into a box or into a pot, and they all mean the same thing, is that it is not conventional finance. It is understanding risk as it relates to climate, as it relates to nature. So there's TCFD, there's TNFD. What are those? They're basically a bunch of metrics that tells you a different story that you have either not written or not read, if you are not in that space. So if you look at the global GDP, it's about $105 trillion, give or take a few. So if anybody tells you that there is not enough money for these kind of projects, they are living in a parallel universe. There's always money. I don't think money is the problem. It is the supply side which is lacking completely. And I think Ibushinta made that point very emphatically. Peter has made that point very emphatically, and Eileen as well. The point is that it is hard work. You don't know the full picture, and you are yourself in that space, so you know what I'm talking. When you start, there is no picture. You don't know what are the rates and what's the coupon, what would the financing look like, do you need blending, would somebody provide a first loss guarantee, who's going to do the offtake, who's going to do the aggregation, who will organize people, who will bring all the diverse stakeholders into the room. It is tough work. It is not that you meet a bunch of people over dinner and he says, okay, we have a deal. This is not how it works. So it's a lot of effort. Unless you are ready for that pain, and unless you are blessed with that passion to do something that really changes things. Parthana talked about solar and all. If you go back to the history of solar, $500 per ton of CO2 emission reduced is what governments have invested in solar. For solar to drop from 35 cents per kilowatt hour to now selling between 2 to 3 US dollar cents per kilowatt hour without any subsidies. So the market takes effort to deliver, effort to develop, and that doesn't happen for free.
Yeah.
So whether you are ready or not, and of course, we can resign ourselves saying that, hey, you know what? Fossil fuels are here to stay. We can't do much about it. You can do that. But then look at India. It has added 300 gigawatt hours of renewable energy in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
So it's possible. And every country is trying their best. We can't resign ourselves to a fate that completely either diminishes humanity or extinguishes humanity. That is certainly not something that we should either accept or even discuss. We must find every bit of enthusiasm we can muster to work. And you have examples. We talked about carbon market. Padarsanu is sitting in the front row. Long before anybody thought carbon was a commodity, he had a deal. One of the first in that space in the world, actually, not just Indonesia. So there are people in the room and in the country that actually have been at the forefront of these conversations, primarily because they had both the imagination and the passion to do things. It can't happen. It's not mutually exclusive. You can have both imagination and passion and willingness to take a certain level of risk. So when you bring all of that together, it is possible to produce the kind of pipeline you need for people like Peter to find the money to invest in it. Absent that, we can keep talking about it, nothing will happen.
Yeah.
So and that is why I say Indonesia is at the forefront of a lot of these innovations. 8 years ago, we did a project, and I was the person orchestrating it all with Barito Pacific, Royal Lestari Utama, Michelin, BNP Paribas. It was a $400 million project.
Yeah.
That is now perhaps the most successful forest conservation project with private money anywhere on the planet at that scale.
Yeah.
So it is possible. There's nothing, impossible is not in our dictionary.
Yeah.
At the Global Alliance, we work on possibilities. And, Peter talked about the roundtable that we just had. It is about finding the right mix of people in the room,
Yeah.
the right stakeholders that can come together, understand the risk, measure the risk, manage the risk, mitigate the risk, and find the resources to create a scale model in Indonesia that revolves around sustainability of palm oil in a way never seen before. And something that's a replicable model that wouldn't need all these experts in the room, that anybody can just take that model and say, okay, here we have a winner, we can invest. So
Yeah.
that's what we need to do. And I think the time is ripe. And I want to close by going back to what Ibushinta was telling, is that, people are binding themselves in twists about Trump and Trump 2.0 and what might happen to the climate universe. Nothing will happen. Of course, it will have some adverse impacts. I'm not questioning that. But the corporate world has already set itself along a very different direction. Even the US corporates. So that's moving. That train is moving at a pretty high speed. It's not going to stop because there are political changes here and there. And so that's what should give us hope and inspiration to keep doing what we are doing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we're running out of time. I have two more questions, one for Pak Archandra and the other one for Ibu Shinta before we close. Pak Archandra, the concept of just transition has been gaining momentum in Indonesia. From your perspective, what does a just transition truly mean for us? And what key factors are essential to ensure its effective strategy and implementation?
Well, before we talk about just energy transition, we have to define our own strategy. Is it energy transitions over energy security, or energy security over energy transition? Which one we choose? If we choose energy security over energy transitions, so what does it mean? For me, fairness and justice should be exercised in this world. Look at the data. World coal consumption. We consume around 8,000 million tons a year in 2024 of coal. Out of 8,000 million tons, China consumes more than 4,000 tons. India consumes more than 1,100 tons. The United States consumes around 400 tons. How about Indonesia? It is only around 150 tons. That's the data. You can check it. How about the CO2 footprint per capita? One example, Qatar is around 35 tons per capita. US, 14.8 tons. Japan, around 9. World average, around 5 tons per capita. Indonesia is only 2.5. So, I wish the international community allows Indonesia to increase their carbon emissions up to the world average, while the other countries where they have more emissions should come down to the world average. That's what we call it fair and just. And then, what is the key factors for the effectiveness of any policy in energy sectors? First, the policy must be technically feasible. In power sector, for example, how resilient is our grid system to accept intermittency from solar PV and wind? How good is our energy mix to embrace intermittency from solar PV and wind? If our energy mix, 60% is coming from coal-fired power plant, it is difficult for the wind and solar PV penetrate to the grid. Do we know that? Do we have a smart grid? No, we don't have it yet. Next, the policy must be commercially viable. How much the rate of return? How much the NPV for the investor? We increase the rate of return, we increase the NPV. Next, how much is the tariff? How is our purchasing power? Can the people afford with higher tariff? That's the question. And then if we increase the tariff, how much is the government room in terms of fiscal to subsidize the increase of the tariff? The last one, the policy or strategy must be politically acceptable. How is the government positions against energy transitions or energy security? How big is our fiscal room to adopt the green energy strategy? And how about the policy against the nuclear power plant? Is it politically acceptable regionally? So, the three key factors that we believe we need to consider before we talk about or craft a policy in energy sector. It should be technically feasible, should be commercially viable, and should be politically acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Chandra. Last but not least, we're talking about green skilling and job creation to Ibu Shinta. Ibu, as chairwoman of APindo, what's actually the opportunity and challenge if we see from the labor force point of view? And are there things that we need to do to prepare the labor force for a different type of business, such as the green economy? And how business and policymakers work together to ensure a just and inclusive shift for workers?
Yes, thank you, Masita. And I hope everybody will stay in because this topic always comes at the end. For me, this is actually a priority. I mean, we talk about green jobs. This is it. For Indonesia, how important is it green jobs, right? Indonesia has an issue right now in creation of jobs because we don't create enough jobs. And yet, where are the skills? So I think this is something that we need to address. We will have opportunity of 1.7 million workforce in 2045, right? So how are we getting these new jobs? So I think there are three things. I'm going to leave it with three things. One, of course, the workforce development is important. At the moment, the existing jobs is very much low skill. If we look at Indonesian, the structure of our manpower, 39% is graduate from primary school. That's the highest, right? So far when we talk about skilled work like green jobs. But we have to think about this. So I think first on the rescaling and upscaling is utmost important. Apindo works now with the labor unions. I said to our labor unions, I said, we fight all the time about minimum wage. Let's start talking about real things. Why don't we start talking about training and skilling you for green jobs? And let's have that certification in place. So right now we have a green job certification for certain of the green jobs, including for renewable energy sectors. This is something that we are now developing, working with all the big companies, is really rescaling some of these people in the labor unions. So I said this is something that we need to be looking forward. Enough of all these conflicts that we have, let's move forward and look at this. So we continue now, starting already with the upscaling and rescaling some of these existing workers. And of course, developing their skill and digital skills is important. You know, green jobs relate a lot with digitals. And people doesn't recognize this, but it's true because it's including the advanced engineering for clean energy, digital skill for smart grids. This is all inclusive there. So digital plays an important role. But the social inclusion aspect is important because the protecting the vulnerable workers on high-risk sectors. We call it, a lot of these are high risk. So government also needs to pay attention on the social component part, including fostering the gender equality and social inclusion. So I'm now very much promoting green jobs also on gender equality side because this is something we also need to look at. How does the gender can play also a role in really giving that balancing as well on the quality. And of course, lastly is the leveraging the technology and innovation for sustainable job growth. I think embracing the green tech for job creation is important, scaling all the circular economy practices, but also supporting startups and entrepreneurship in green sectors. I love this subject, because when we talk about job creation, look at a lot of our startups. They started the green works. This is amazing, and we have to support this ecosystem. So I think one area is, yes, the formal jobs, but the informal jobs of Indonesia is the key. There are over 59% of informal workers, and numbers keep on increasing. So we have to empower them. And part of it, I think, supporting a lot of the startups doing this on the green tech space. There's a lot of them. I think these are areas that we need to look at. So let's not put green jobs on the back burner. I mean, financing is important, I understand, technology is important, but the jobs, the skills needs to be there. If not, who's gonna work for it? So that's my ending. Thank you.
Thank you, Yusinta. Thank you. So I wouldn't conclude the session because, as you know, transition is always a complicated and multi-layers effort from all of us. At the global level, we still need to do more. And then at the national level, Indonesia actually has the opportunity to reap on the higher growth to green growth as well. Not only from the investment side, but also from the employment side. But like Pak Archana mentioned, also the old economy, we need to balance as well because we cannot shift towards a new direction too fast. Yeah, transition risk is also there. So balancing everything is also something that we need to pay attention to in the near future. So please join me giving a round of applause to all the speakers of this afternoon. Thank you. I'll give the floor back to MC.
Yes, thank you very much for all of our speakers and moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, a huge round of applause for all of the gentlemen and also beautiful ladies on the stage. So for now, please remain on the stage. We kindly invite Bapak Rifki as the Director of Strategy and Administration Indonesia Business Council to please give a memento as a token of appreciation to all of the speakers and moderator. And of course, we will wrap it up with a photo session later. And now, here comes one of the memento for Bapak Archandra Tahar as a former Minister for Energy and Mineral Resources, Republic of Indonesia, and also Elim Sritaba, Chief Sustainability Officer of Asia Pulp and Paper Group, and Mr. Peter Kennedy, Chief Investment Officer of the Global Fund for Coral Reefs, and also Satya Tripathi, Secretary General of the Global Alliance for a Sustainable Planet, and also Sinta Wekamdani, Chairwoman of Indonesia Employers Association and founder of Indonesia Business Council for Sustainable Development. All right, now, ladies and gentlemen, please join us on the stage as we will have a picture. This is a very beautiful photo opportunity for all of our distinguished speakers and moderator. Thank you very much.